Timothy Hare and the Exciting Excursion by Lauren Wright. It was a breezy, golden morning in Whimsywood, and Timothy Hare felt the familiar tug of adventure calling to him. His last journey into the Enchanted Forest had been full of excitement, and today he could sense something new awaiting him. The forest was vast, full of untrodden paths, and Timothy had overheard Athena Owl speak of a mysterious place deep within, a place known as the Forgotten Glade. Athena had described it as a hidden part of the Enchanted Forest, rarely visited, where old magic still lingered. It was a land where time seemed to slow, and whispers of ancient trees held secrets long forgotten by the rest of the world. Determined to find it, Timothy packed a small satchel with a few snacks and a map he had been drawing of the forest. Though parts of it were incomplete, Timothy had always relied on his curiosity to guide him, and today was no different. Before long, Timothy was bounding down familiar paths, the cool forest air rushing through his fur. The trees gradually grew taller and more twisted, and soon Timothy reached a crossroads. This was a path he had never taken. It was overgrown, and its entrance marked by a large, gnarled oak tree. "This must be the way," Timothy murmured, his heart racing with anticipation. He stepped into the shadowy path, his long ears twitching at every sound. The further he went, the quieter the forest became, as if the very air was holding its breath. Vines thickened, and moss covered every stone. After what felt like hours, Timothy emerged into a clearing bathed in soft, shimmering light. Before him lay the Forgotten Glade. The trees here were unlike any he had ever seen. Their bark was silver, and their leaves glowed with a faint, otherworldly luminescence. A calm breeze stirred the air, and the glade seemed to hum with a gentle, magical energy. Timothy's wide eyes took in everything. He had found it, the mysterious place Athena had spoken of. But something else had caught his attention. In the center of the glade was a small stone pedestal, and on it rested a golden flower, its petals shimmering in the light. Curious, Timothy approached the pedestal. The flower radiated warmth, and as he drew closer, he noticed an inscription carved into the stone. It was in a language he couldn't understand, but as he looked at the flower, he felt a deep sense of importance surrounding it. But before he could ponder further, a voice echoed around him. "Beware, traveler." Timothy jumped, his heart pounding in his chest. He spun around and found himself face to face with an elderly deer, her coat dappled with silver spots that glimmered in the light. I didn't mean to intrude," Timothy stammered, his paws fidgeting. The deer's kind eyes softened. "I know you mean no harm, young hare, but the flower you see is tied to this glade's ancient magic. It protects this part of the forest from fading into oblivion." Timothy looked back at the flower, suddenly realizing the weight of its significance. What happens if something happens to it? The glade will lose its magic, and the Enchanted Forest will begin to fade. The magical beings who call this part of the forest home will begin to disappear, she said. That flower must remain undisturbed, or the balance and the magic of this place will be broken. Timothy's adventurous spirit was tempered by a growing sense of responsibility. He stepped away from the pedestal. "I won't touch it," he said. The deer nodded. "There is another problem. The magic that protects the glade has weakened. Dark forces from the farthest reaches of the forest have sensed it, and they will come, soon." Timothy felt a chill run down his spine. "Is there anything I can do to help?" The deer tilted her head, studying him. "Perhaps. There is a spring, deep in the forest, known only as the Water of Memory. It holds an ancient magic, powerful enough to restore the protection of this glade. But the path is dangerous, and few know the way." Timothy's heart pounded, but he nodded resolutely. "I'll find it. Tell me how to get there." The deer stepped forward, her hoof brushing the ground. "Follow the whispers of the trees. They will guide you. But be wary. The path is guarded by creatures who will try to lead you astray." With a final nod, Timothy set off into the forest once more, determined to find the water of memory. The trees around him seemed alive with whispers, and though he didn't fully understand them, he trusted his instincts, following the soft murmurs deeper into the forest. Before long, he came to a river, its waters dark and swirling. There was no bridge, but a set of stones lay scattered across it, forming a treacherous path. Timothy carefully leapt from stone to stone, but a little over halfway across, the last few rocks were spaced far apart. He hesitated, unsure if he could make the jump. He gathered his courage, took a breath, and leaped. Unfortunately, his foot slipped on the damp rock, and instead of landing safely on the next stone, Timothy tumbled into the river, the cold water shocking his breath out of his lungs. The current was swift, and it carried him downstream quickly. Timothy struggled to catch a breath, swimming as powerfully as he was able towards the riverbank. Just as his limbs began to tire, his feet touched the bottom of the river. With a surge of determination, Timothy mustered his strength and swam onward, reaching the riverbank and pulling himself out of the water onto the stony shore. After taking a moment to catch his breath, Timothy looked around. He had no idea where he was. He'd never been to this part of the Enchanted Forest, and the trees' murmuring had gone silent. Timothy was completely lost. He reached into his pocket for his map, but the water from the river had swept his satchel away, and he didn't see it anywhere nearby. "Well," Timothy told himself, "I could walk along the riverbank until I find the place I fell in. Or..." He glanced into the forest, weak beams of light occasionally reaching through the branches and leaves to illuminate the forest floor. "I might be able to cut through the forest to find the path further in." "You should definitely do that," a voice spoke from the shadows. "If you go back along the riverbank, it'll take far too long. Nobody wants to spend a night in the forest, away from cozy home and family." Timothy looked around, but he couldn't see anyone. "Who's there?" he called. "I'm just a friend. You seem like you're trying to make a tough decision, and I thought I'd help." A pair of bright eyes shone from a shadow. Timothy's heart raced, and he remembered the deer's warning about creatures who would try to deceive him. "You may have a point," Timothy responded carefully to the voice. "But it would certainly be safer to go back along the riverbank." The voice laughed, and Timothy listened closely. It didn't sound like a nice laugh at all. "Safety is overrated, and it's boring. You look like you're on an adventure, and don't adventurers take risks?" The hairs on the back of Timothy's neck stood up. "You know, that doesn't sound like something a friend would say. My friends at home help me to make good decisions, and part of that is choosing to be safe. Thank you for your advice, but I think I'll go back upriver." Timothy took a few steps along his chosen path, and the voice snarled. "Even if you do make it to the water and restore the glade, we'll win eventually. We are inevitable." The voice grew louder and more cruel with each word until it fell silent, and all Timothy could hear was the rushing of the river. Timothy made his way back along the riverbank until he reached the spot where he'd fallen, the forest growing darker as the day wore on. When he arrived at the familiar spot, Timothy stopped and listened until he could hear the murmurs of the trees again, and he followed the sound until he found the path that took him deeper into the forest. Eventually, he found himself at the mouth of a cave. A faint glow came from within, and Timothy could hear the sound of water trickling distantly. But as he approached, A low growl echoed from the cave's depths. The dim light glinted off of a pair of amber eyes and reflected off of large, sharp white teeth, ultimately revealing the shadowy figure of a large wolf stepping into view. It barred his way, growling softly. "You may not pass," the wolf said, his voice deep and menacing. Timothy's heart raced, but he stood tall, despite his trembling paws. "I seek the water of memory," Timothy said, his voice steady. "It's needed to restore the forgotten glade." The wolf's eyes gleamed. "Many have sought the water, but none have succeeded. Turn back now, or you will face their same fate." Timothy hesitated for a moment, but then he looked deeper into the wolf's eyes and saw not menace, but a flicker of sadness. "Wait," Timothy said. "You've been here a long time, haven't you? You're bound to this place as its guardian." The wolf's growl faded, and he looked away. "I am the guardian. I must keep the dark forces from disturbing the spring." "But the spring is meant to help the Enchanted Forest," Timothy said softly. "A guard has to be wise and know who to stop and who to let pass. By letting me through, you can help restore the magic of the forest." For a long moment, the wolf was silent. Then, slowly, he stepped aside. "Go. The spring lies just ahead. Be careful not to take more than what is needed." Timothy entered the cave, and there, at its heart, was the water of memory, glowing softly in a stone basin. With reverence, Timothy filled a small flask. As he made his way back to the forgotten glade, the air around him seemed to shimmer with renewed energy, and the path seemed to speed him along his way. He reached the glade just as the first rays of sunset filtered through the trees. Timothy poured the water of memory onto the roots of the silver trees, and a soft glow spread throughout the glade. The golden flower brightened, the strength of its magic restored. The elderly deer approached once more, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've done it. The glade is restored, and the Enchanted Forest is safe, thanks to your courage and wisdom." Timothy smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "I'm really glad I was able to help out. Helping the Enchanted Forest helps all of us who live in and around it." The deer nodded. "You are wise indeed, Timothy Hare. Wise beyond your years. Now hurry home, and go with my gratitude." Timothy nodded and left. He made his way home, proud of what he'd been able to accomplish. His heart swelled with the joy of a job well done, and with the knowledge that even if a journey ventured into paths unknown, a little courage, a healthy dose of wisdom, and a bit of magic would always see him through.